Hello and welcome to another episode of Geared Toward Gear. My name is Sean and I'm so glad you're here. Today's video I'm kind of excited about. It's definitely going to be a departure, I think, from kind of normal programming. It's going to be a little atypical from what you've seen on this channel thus far. And we're going to be talking about precious metals and kind of just kind of sharing some information about them and whether or not it's a good idea for investment, for collecting, things of that nature. So, this video may be a little more, I guess, academic than some of my other videos. You may find it totally boring, in which case, by all means, feel free to skip this one. But I was going through some stuff that had been given to me by my grandmother, and it just kind of got me thinking a few days ago, and I just wanted to do a video on precious metals in general and give you some of my thoughts. And I'll start by saying this. I am not a financial expert. I'm not a financial planner. I'm not a CPA. I'm not a precious metals expert. I am simply a guy who has some precious metals, and I am somebody who, I guess I take pride in being, trying to be as fiscally responsible for myself and my family as I can in terms of investing and saving and things of that nature. So, I guess I'm probably more financially savvy than the average person, but I'm definitely no expert. So everything I'm going to tell you is either going to be just basic information. Anything that's more kind of advice is going to be exactly what I would tell a close friend or family member. And I actually have told many close friends and family members exactly what I'm going to tell you today. So just take it with a grain of salt. I'm no expert. You guys can do what you want, buy what you want, collect what you want, invest how you want. This is just kind of something I want to talk about because I think it's interesting and I think you may find it educational and interesting as well. So let's get into it. So we've got some money on the table. We also have some currency on the table, and there's a difference, and we'll talk a little bit about that. And so I think kind of the first thing to kind of specify or designate is the difference between money and currency. So the most basic way I can probably phrase this would be to say money stores its value intrinsically based on its composition, what it's made from. So this 1 ounce piece of silver is money. This is not currency, this is money. This 10-ounce bar of silver from the Royal Canadian Mint, this is money. This is not currency. Currency is, how can I put it? Currency is something that possesses purchasing power. So a dollar bill is currency. It stores no intrinsic value. It has purchasing power that's been given to it by a government. So the government says that this is worth $1 of goods and services, but the actual dollar bill itself has no intrinsic value. So this is currency, this is money, okay? A quarter is currency, this is money, right? So that's the basic difference between currency and money. Another thing I think to kind of designate is, or just touch on briefly, is the concept or the definition of what we would call fiat currency or fiat money. And if you're into precious metals or if you've watched these sorts of videos before, you've probably heard the term, you may be familiar with it. But fiat money is currency with no intrinsic value, right? So an American dollar is fiat currency, a British pound, a Canadian dollar, a yen, a euro, you name it. There's no paper money or coin that exists currently in the world that is not fiat, meaning its purchasing power has been granted by the government. It has no intrinsic value, right? So kind of going back to the difference between currency and money is that all currency is fiat. It's been assigned purchasing power by the government. It's backed by nothing. So that's the basic difference between, or I guess the definition of fiat. And fiat's actually a Latin word that just means let it be done. And so, in medieval times, for example, if a monarch were to say, bring me all the gold in the land or bring me all the sheep. That would be done by fiat, by him saying, let it be done. And that's where we get that word. So currency is given that assigned value or assigned purchasing power by fiat of the government. In this case, the United States government, but the same can be said for any government around the globe, frankly. Another quick term I want to touch on is inflation. And very basically, and I'm kind of doing this on the fly, guys, so I apologize, but I guess the best way I could put it is inflation is when prices increase and the amount of purchasing power that something like a dollar has goes down. So it's a decrease in the purchasing power of currency is what inflation is. So let's talk a little bit about the gold standard. Okay, so, and I'm specifically talking about the United States in this case, but as you guys may know, I'm sure many, if not most of you probably do, the United States used to be on the gold standard, meaning that for every bit of currency that existed, that was in circulation, there was an equal amount of gold in reserves to back up that currency. And we've been off of the gold standard officially since around 1970, 1971, somewhere in there. It kind of started, or actually, it might have been even later, I don't know, 1975, something like that. But it kind of started decades earlier, but by the mid-70s, we were officially and totally and completely off of the gold standard, meaning that all of this currency is now fiat, and it's backed by nothing other than a promise by the government that says this is worth $1 in goods and services, or $5 in the case of the $5 bill. So there was this thing that happened in the early 30s called the Gold Reserve Act. And this was a executive order that happened that basically, it didn't, I guess it kind of confiscated, but essentially required all individuals to sell any of their gold that they owned to the Treasury. So the U.S. government was taking all of the gold and putting it in Fort Knox, which was kind of where the gold depository was. And that's where we get the term, and I've probably even used this term in talking about knives, where we say, oh man, this lockup, it's as strong as Fort Knox, right? That's where we get that term, because Fort Knox is where we kept all of our gold for a very, very long time. So the Gold Reserve Act essentially took all the gold from the people, put it in the hands of the government, and we had everything backed by gold. And it caused a spike in the price of gold, which kind of was the idea, right? Kind of this time in history being right around and kind of just after the Depression. Anyway, I'm getting a little too nerded out right now, so let's just move on. So executive order was put in place, and it actually made it a crime to even own gold or trade it. Again, that started in the 30s, and over the next several decades, that kind of went away, and we got off of the gold standard. So now nothing is technically worth anything other than a promise from the government. So, and let me stop here for a second and say this, because I feel like the tone of this may be leading you in the wrong direction. I am not a precious metals collector. I am not one who thinks that there's going to be a massive economic collapse, that you should not have fiat currency, that you should put all your money in precious metals. I'm actually going to caution you quite heavily against that in a number of cases. So I am not a doomsday preparedness precious metals guy, if that makes sense. So I don't want you to get that idea that that's where I'm going with this, because I'm certainly not. I'm just kind of laying a little bit of a background. So let's quickly talk about the difference between bullion and numismatic currency or numismatic coins. And the basic difference is that bullion, which is this silver bar, this silver coin, these silver bars, that's all bullion. As a matter of fact, everything on the table except for this quarter and these 2 bills. This is all bullion. And bullion is money, as we talked about. It's a tangible asset. You can touch it, and it has intrinsic value, right? The weight of the material it's made from, in this case, silver. Numismatic coins, or numismatics, just kind of the philosophy and study of coins and collecting coins, is a very different thing than bullion. So numismatic coins are going to be kind of your rare and collectible coins. And a lot of us growing up, I mean, myself included as a kid, I collected buffalo nickels and all kinds of stuff that I got from, relatives. This is a quarter from the year 1944. So this is 90% silver, but point being, I collected some coins, nothing crazy, but numismatics is the study and collection of coins. And that's very different from bullion and just kind of raw chunks of metal, right? So quick little difference there between numismatic currency and precious metals or bullion. Okay, so is it a good idea to invest in silver? It's not the best idea in the world, but I think it's good in moderation. And I'll kind of give you a few examples of that. And before I do so, let's just look at some of the silver, because it's fun to look at, it's fun to play with, it's fun to touch, because it's like treasure and it makes a cool sound. So let's look at a couple of these. So here's a Canadian maple leaf. This is a 1 ounce silver coin minted by the Royal Canadian Mint. It is, well, I'll talk about the 4 nines later, but that's a Canadian maple leaf, 1 ounce of silver. Here is a American Eagle, a silver American Eagle, also 1 troy ounce of silver. Here's a privately minted round. So this is not a coin, this is a round. Also 1 ounce, 1 troy ounce of silver. As you can see there, 9995 fine silver, 1 troy ounce. So these are all 1 ounce of silver. They're all worth the same in terms of their weight in silver. Here is a what they would call fractional silver. And the same would be said for gold. This is not a, basically anything less than an ounce would be fractional. So this is 5 grams of silver, and there's about 28 grams in an ounce, but a troy ounce is actually a little heavier than an ounce, and I'll touch on that later. Then you've got bars, like this one from the Royal Canadian Mint. See if I can get it out of the case here. I'm not one that cares about touching my silver or getting fingerprints on it. Here's a 10 ounce bar from the Royal Canadian Mint, which is, I mean, it's beautiful. I mean, it's nice to look at. It's quite heavy. I mean, really heavy for its size. And then you've got some more kind of special, not specialty, but, things that are kind of marketed and marked up. This is a gift from an old boss of mine. This is a 1 troy ounce silver bullet. This is an exact replica as far as dimensions of a 5.56 NATO rifle cartridge. And then here's some 1 ounce poured bars from a private mint. There's 10 of them there. So this is the same as this in terms of its weight. And then just some more of those bars from the Canadian Mint. And I'll say this, the vast majority of my silver are government minted coins. I have a lot of, well, actually I don't have a lot of, I have a few Canadian maple leaves. I have a lot of American Silver Eagles. I have some stuff from the Perth Mint, some stuff from the Austrian Mint. And we are back. I apologize for the delay. My phone stopped recording for no apparent reason. So I think where I left off was just talking about the fact that the vast majority of my silver are going to be government minted coins. The bars, for example, I got at a really, really good deal where I had like a coupon. These poured bars from a private mint, again, same thing, just a super crazy deal where it just made sense to buy them. But I would say the majority of my silver is going to be government coins. But to me, it's not as important to have government coins versus private mints, bars. Buy what you want. Obviously, the smaller stuff is more portable, but that is what it is. So, and real quick, let me show you these dollars. And the reason I brought these out specifically is that these are silver certificates, and these were given to me by my grandmother. And so they're more sentimental than anything. But if you look at this $1 bill and this $5 bill, down at the bottom, right below where it says $1 and $5, if you read that, it says $1 in silver payable to the bearer on demand. And same thing for $5. And these are both from, let's look at the dates here. The $1 bill is from 1957 and the $5 bill from 1953. So in 1953, you could take this into any bank and hand it to them, and they would be required to give you $5 worth of silver in exchange for this $5 bill. That's obviously no longer the case, but that's an old silver certificate. And these aren't particularly, highly valuable pieces of currency, but again, they're just sentimental because they were gifts from some relatives. So same thing with the quarter, the old 90% silver quarter. So I say all that. I guess I've kind of laid enough groundwork and been nerdy enough up to this point to kind of close it out with my thoughts on investing in silver. So there's a number of ways you can invest your money. And when I say invest, I mean you purchase something for the sole purpose of it gaining money over time, and you buy when it's cheaper, you sell when it's worth more, and you make money on it, right? That's the basic concept of investing, whether it's real estate, which I personally love, stocks, mutual funds, retirement accounts, 401ks, those are all investments, and precious metals is also an investment. It's also important to note that a precious metal, whether it's silver, gold, even copper, which don't even get me started on copper in terms of like copper coins. I may touch on it towards the end, but they're worthless. Let me just put it that way. These are what would be called a commodity. Okay, a commodity is something that has a assigned value. That value goes up and down. There's a market for it. So a piece of silver is a commodity just like a bushel of wheat or a barrel of oil. It's a tangible asset that has an assigned value in a marketplace that goes up and down. So these are commodities, and that's how I look at them. I do not look at these as collectibles. I do not collect silver the way I collect knives, right? I collect knives because I enjoy them, I use them, and I have no expectation that they go up in value over time. It's just something, it's a hobby. For me, precious metals is not a hobby, and this is where kind of the advice comes in. What I tell my friends and family, and again, do what you want by all means. I'm not trying to preach to anybody, but the way I kind of look at this is collecting silver can become pretty dangerous because it's very pretty. There's really cool stuff like this that's marketed, kind of novelty stuff, and it can kind of get out of hand. And I see a lot of people on social media and on YouTube who are really, really into silver and gold, and they put every extra penny into those things as an investment, but more so as a collection. And the problem I see with precious metals is the way they're marketed. It's really genius, to be honest with you, the way a lot of these private mints and even government mints market precious metals. They really hype it up. They create these limited runs and these special editions and these series of coins and bars, and they really try to pull you in and get you kind of collecting and kind of coming back for more and coming back for more. And I think that can be dangerous for a few reasons. One, I just personally don't think you should collect silver. I think if you want to invest in it in moderation, that's totally fine. That's what I do. But, these aren't comic books or baseball cards or stamps or folding knives, right? This is a commodity. It's not a hobby to me. So that's how I look at it. The other thing to keep in mind, and this is really the most important thing, is when you're talking about investments and actual making a financial investment, the only thing that matters is return on investment, right? So if I put $1,000 in a stock or $1,000 in precious metals, what I'm really looking for personally is a return on my investment. And you're not going to get a great return on investment with silver. The only reason why I have some silver is that I think it's okay to have some diversity in your overall financial portfolio as long as it's in moderation. And let me give you an example of why silver is not the best investment in the world. I have a mutual fund, just one particular mutual fund, for example. It's an S&P 500 fund, and it consistently, for about the last 20 years, returns about 10% annually. Meaning if I put $1,000 in it every year, I'm going to make $100 every year. And it has a long track record of doing that. If you look at silver in the last 30 years, say 1989 till now, the annual rate of return is about 3.5%. And that's not accounting for inflation. So if you put money into silver 30 years ago, today you've only made 3.5% per year on that investment. If you account for inflation, that number goes down even further to like 1%. So if I bought all this 30 years ago, I've only made 1% per year on my investment. So the rate of return is very, very low on silver. That's just a fact. Silver and precious metals are very volatile in the market. They go up and down and up and down and up and down. The general trend may look like it goes up, but if you adjust for inflation and you really look at the value over time and the annual rate of return, it's quite low. So this is not a get rich quick thing. You know, if you go out and buy $1,000 worth of silver today, you're not going to sell it in a year and get rich. That's just not how silver has worked over the last 100 years. It's just not. There's been some pretty big spikes and there's been some pretty big dips. There's always predictions on, you know, a lot of people are saying they expect it to go over $50 an ounce, you know, by the year 2020, which is next year. Right now, 1 ounce of silver is worth just shy of $15. Another thing to keep in mind, and I think this kind of is a little telling, at least I think it is, if you go on to a website or you go into a gold and silver store or pawn shop and you want to buy silver or gold for that matter, if I go to any silver bullion website and I want to buy this coin, what am I buying it with? What do they want in exchange for this? They want dollars. They want US dollars. They don't want my silver. They'll buy my silver from me and then they'll mark it up and sell it for US dollars. If I go into a pawn shop and say, hey, how much for that silver bar? They're not going to say, well, I'll sell it to you for, you know, 1/10 of an ounce of gold. No, they want dollars. So the fact that everybody wants dollars should give you a little bit of caution, right? So it's just, I don't know. To me, that says a lot, that all these companies that are marketing very wisely these special campaigns and you need to invest in precious metals now because it's the only thing that's going to be worth anything in the future once the dollar loses all of its value. What they're selling you, they're wanting you to pay dollars for. So they're kind of talking out of both ends of their mouth. They're telling you this is going to be worth nothing, but this is what they want from you. So just keep that in mind. I think it's worth noting. So rate of return on silver is not great, but for me, it's just a little bit more diversity in my investments and is a very small percentage of my investments. So my general advice to friends and family is do not invest any more than 10% in precious metals. And what I mean by that is if you have $1,000 that you're planning on investing, I would put 900 of that minimum in things like IRAs, stocks, mutual funds, 401ks, and $100 max in precious metals. I mean, that's for me the absolute maximum. And I frankly don't even invest near 10% in precious metals. But for me, that's a total max. I just see so many people putting every dime and quarter and dollar that they own into precious metals, and I just don't think it's a good idea. I do not foresee a complete economic collapse. You cannot eat this. It's not going to feed you in an economic collapse. Could you barter with it? Yeah, that's one argument, right? Is that if there's a total economic collapse, the value of the dollar goes down to zero. All we're going to be left with is gold and silver, and that's what everyone's going to want. Well, maybe not. Maybe they're going to want food. Maybe they're going to want fuel. They may not give a shit about your silver. So I don't necessarily buy into the fact that in an economic downturn, this is all of a sudden going to become the currency that we use. Never in history, ever in the United States, has bullion been currency. Ever. Currency has always been paper currency, whether it was British currency in the colonial times, whether it was Confederate money during the Civil War, or the current US dollar. We have never used precious metals as currency ever in our history, and I don't see that happening ever in our future, frankly. And for that reason, you know, it's always nice to have a little stack of silver lying around just in case. It certainly doesn't hurt. I think it's okay for financial preparedness, but again, for me, this is an investment. It's not a collection. I'm not hedging this against an expected apocalyptic scenario where I'm on the side of the dirt road in a Mad Max type setting, and this is the only thing that's worth anything to anybody. I just don't see that happening, and so based on everything I've said and just kind of the low rate of return, frankly, it's not the best investment. And so I think if you're going to invest, do it with caution, do your research, and don't put all your eggs in one basket. Diversify your investments as much as possible. And frankly, consult an expert. I mean, I'm not one. I'm just giving you basic information on some history and my personal feelings. Yours may vary. You may feel the opposite way, and that's totally fine. I'm not here to judge anybody or tell you what to do. I'm just telling you what I would tell somebody else if they were to ask me, hey, Sean, what do you think about precious metals and investing in them? This is kind of my answer in the form of a video. So I just kind of wanted to talk about that. I'm sure I probably left things out, and the comments may be interesting on this video, or there may be none, because this probably was pretty boring for most of you. But for those of you that did watch this and found it in any way entertaining or educational, I certainly appreciate you watching. Thank you all so much, and I'll talk to you soon. All right, I'm back one last time, and I promise this is the last time. I feel like this video has kind of been a hodgepodge, and hopefully there's been some continuity in the thought and kind of flow of the video. Probably not, and if not, that's fine. But two things real quick that I mentioned briefly earlier that I didn't follow up on is the weight of a troy ounce. So silver is measured in troy ounces, which is 1.1 ounce. So if we weigh this coin, it should weigh roughly 1.1 ounce. And it is exactly 1.1. So that's one true troy ounce. So just as an FYI, a silver bar that weighs 10 ounces should weigh, 10 troy ounces should weigh 11 ounces, because 1.1 per ounce. So just a hair under 11 ounces. So that is a troy ounce. The one other thing I mentioned earlier is the Canadian Mint. They have some of the purest silver that exists, and they've just really nailed down their refining process. They have a kind of headquarters in Ottawa and a manufacturing facility in Winnipeg. And one of my old bosses actually used to be in charge of safety and security for both facilities. And the Canadian Mint is unique in that their silver is more pure than that of the American Mint or any, or U.S. Mint, I should say, or any private mint, in that on almost all silver that you find, it'll say 999 fine silver. That's something you'll just see. You'll see it everywhere. 999. That's what they all say, is that it's 999 fine silver, which is just the purity level. Again, 999. The Canadian Mint, on the other hand, has 4 nines, right? So 9999, which you can see right there. Same thing on this 10-ounce bar, 4 nines. So their purity level is actually higher. So if you can get a Canadian Maple Leaf at the same price or cheaper than a American Eagle, it's actually technically more silver in that it's more pure. So just something I thought I'd point out about the Canadian Mint that I think is very interesting. And they just frankly make really beautiful stuff. So that's it. Thank you guys again, those of you who stuck around to the end and endured my rambling. I really do appreciate it, and I'll talk to you soon.